I still have the program. It was for a day of justice, subtitle Restorative Justice Works. It was a day devoted to examining the principles and practices of restorative justice, devoted to workshops on how restorative justice works in school programs, all the way from lower school levels all the way up through high school and university. Also examining victim offender conferencing within the criminal justice system. The focal point of the day was a panel discussion. It was a panel discussion that focused on a local program, a local victim offender conferencing program for juveniles who'd been convicted of nonviolent, non-serious crimes. A program that brings victims and offenders together. It was introduced, the panel was introduced by Ron Clausen, the founding director of the Victim Offender Reconciliation Program of the Central Valley, VORP Central Valley. Ron gave an introduction to the principles and practices of restorative justice. And then Judge David Gottlieb, I don't know if you probably remember it, followed with a very clear presentation of the impacts of this program on the youth of Fresno County. Very clear examples of reductions in recidivism, and very passionate for a judge, I thought, in saying how important this program was for the county. He was the presiding juvenile judge at the time. The panel was one of the largest panels I've ever seen. On the panel sat the public defender of Fresno County, the district attorney of Fresno County, the sheriff of Fresno County, the superintendent of the schools of Fresno, the police chief of the city of Fresno, the police chief of the city of Reedley, Judge Gottlieb himself. Basically, everyone involved in all elements of the criminal justice system in Fresno. In addition, there was a person there, and I didn't bring up my glasses, but I hope I can read his name. No, I can't read his name, but he was the author, Mike Reynolds. Does that name, Mike Reynolds, mean anything to anybody here? Yeah. What? Author of the Three Strikes Law. Mike Reynolds was on the panel. It turns out his son had been through a victim offender conference long before it was very popular. His son, now a successful lawyer, had been through, as an offender, a victim offender conference that had changed his life. And after hearing all the statistics, and as the panel went on, I remember there were a few voices on the panel, and you could guess which ones they were, actually including Mr. Reynolds, saying, I think the program is good, but I need more data. I need more data. And I remember Judge Gottlieb disagreeing. But more than that, I remember the people who are closest to the action on the ground, notably the chief of police of Reedley, the sheriff of Fresno County, and especially the chief of police of Fresno City, who said, I don't need any more data. This program works. I see it working every day. Judge Gottlieb, I think it's fair to say, is responsible for institutionalizing a victim offender conference program within the juvenile justice system in Fresno County. When I say institutionalizing, it means that it's become the default for non-serious, nonviolent crime. Victims and offenders coming together, often with representatives of their community, family members, in conference, and he'll describe that. And I think that's an outstanding, well, I'll let it, what do you hear? You're going to be clapping a lot more. What's interesting, and Tim Nightengale is standing next to him, is that long before Judge Gottlieb was on the scene, back in 1982, the VORP program began in Fresno County, really without any clients. And it was through the persistence of Ron Clausen and those that came after, including Tim, that slowly, the process of victim offender conferencing came to be understood as a valuable asset within that system of juvenile justice. That was a nonprofit organization supported by community groups. So if Judge Gottlieb, which he did, institutionalized it and provided a way for it to become mainstream within the system, the maintenance and day-to-day running of the conferencing and the administration of it and the follow-up on the agreements that are made is done by a nonprofit. An amazing public-private partnership that represents our future. Now, Judge Gottlieb was the one that was invited to speak here tonight. And a couple weeks ago, he contacted David, and I actually think this is really awesome. And he said, I'm bringing Tim Nightengale of the VORP with me. Now that is a public-private partnership. Welcome to Davis. What you're doing, what the two of you are doing, and what others of the volunteers are doing is you're pointing us in the direction of our collective future. You're providing us here in Yolo County with a vision for where we're going to be going in the next couple of years. And I thank both of you for helping redefine the meaning of justice in this state. Join me in welcoming Judge Gottlieb and Mr. Nightengale.
Courtroom that I have to speak to, so...
because we're recording, you got to stay on the mic.
Oh, we got to stay on the mic. Okay. So we'll kind of trade it off then. All right, well, I want to thank everybody for having us here. I'm thrilled, and I'm honored to be able to share the stage with those honorees and awardees that came before me. I'm humbled by some of the work that you're doing here. It's amazing work. You know, I'm a huge fan of Jeff Adachi and Justice Cruz Reynoso. I'm just humbled to be able to be on the same stage as great people that have gotten those awards here today. I do want to make just one or two quick corrections on my bio. I'm not a justice. Not my wife would say eventually I will be, but I'm not a justice yet. I'm a judge. I'm a Superior Court judge. I also served as the presiding juvenile court judge for a period of 5 years. I got reassigned about a year ago. I'm now handling a domestic violence calendar, and I'll get to some things about that in just a little bit. But I invited Tim here because he and I basically have been a team in rallying a lot of people together to try and get the program that's in Fresno to be accepted and be implemented statewide. I mean, it is a program that works. We talk about the data. We have the data. We'll go through some of that with you here today. And if it can work in the birthplace of 3 strikes and some of the toughest sentencing that goes on in the state, in terms of sentencing people to state prison per capita, we're probably in the top 5. We are the lowest funded county in terms of funding for AB 109, and we have the most overcrowded jail in the entire state. So if we can do it down in Fresno County, I know you guys can do it in Davis. And after hearing these awardees here, you can definitely do it. So, and I'm going to pledge my support so that if you need some help, if you need somebody coming up here and talking to people and going through what we've done, we're here to do it. We're here to do it. So, and I always tell this part of the story, and that is that it took us about a year of planning and processing and blueprinting and just nailing down all the details. But I think that any other organization, any other collaborative effort could probably get something up and running in half that time now. We're lucky enough, we've been meeting with Merced. Actually, Tim's been meeting with Merced. They're very close to up and running on a program very similar to ours. I know there are some other counties nearby. Madera's real interested. I know we've spoken with Kern County. So if the Central Valley, as I said, if the Central Valley can do this, any other county can do it as well. I know that there are some programs up in San Francisco that are similar. I just think this is the way to do things. Our jails are overcrowded, our prisons are overcrowded. The community wants to get involved, victims want to get involved, and this is kind of the answer to all of those concerns. So how did it all start? We were extremely fortunate in about 2006 or 7 to get some funding from the state to build a new juvenile justice campus. We had a facility that had been built in the 50s that was just a disgrace to our justice system in Fresno. And it was horrific what we were doing with our kids in the juvenile hall. There was a big article in, I believe it was the Sacramento Bee at the time, and the Fresno Bee, that called it the Hall of Shame. And it truly was the Hall of Shame. So after a lot of efforts by a lot of good people, in 2009, July 5th of 2009, we opened up this beautiful juvenile justice campus. And it not only was meant for a place for the families and the kids to come to receive a different type of justice, but the facilities that housed the youth were a campus. They were truly built in a manner so that it was like a high school campus with programs, with facilities, with a lot of different innovative things created. So I was lucky enough to be the juvenile court presiding judge in 2008. I was assigned, knowing that this was going to open up in a year. So I saw that there was a lot of extra room and extra space here to do things. And I actually had come up to Santa Clara County, and they have a juvenile facility. If you ever get a chance to go there, it's amazing. They have psychiatrists, social workers, case managers, educators, all at the juvenile campus and the court. And that's so that the kids, it's a one-stop shop. And I thought, God, how innovative is that? That's amazing. So when we were about to open up this facility, I thought, you know what, we need to do something like that here. We need to have some other opportunities so that the kids are not just coming to court, but they're coming maybe to learn some things and for some innovation. So one of the things we talked about in these early meetings was, wouldn't it be great to have a restorative justice program and not only have it, but have it right there so that when I tell my kids, hey, you know, I want you to participate in this program, you'll go across the hall and you'll meet with Tim or somebody else over there and you'll start the process of restorative justice right then and there. You don't have to go 2 days from now. You don't have to make phone calls. You don't have to, wait for somebody to call you. You're going to go right across the hall. And if you don't make it across there, you come back and see me and I'll take you over there. So this was how it all began. All right, so let's go to the next. All right, so what is restorative justice? I'm going to ask Tim to kind of go through the history of that and tell you the nuts and bolts, which most of you probably already know, but I'm going to have him go through some of that.
Before I start, I just think it's worth it. I heard a lot of speeches before this started, and they were very amazing. So why don't we give an extra round of applause for all the speeches that preceded this. Very enjoyable program. Thank you very much. So, restorative justice, you'll see in the programs on the last page, there's a quote from Howard Zehr. Howard Zehr started restorative justice in Elkhart, Indiana. And when he had started it there, Ron Clausen was going to seminary. He volunteered while he was participating there, and he moved back to Fresno, and he thought, I have to start this here. So Victim Offender Reconciliation Program of the Central Valley is the second oldest in the country. And that quote that you see from Howard Zehr is part of what motivated this work. If any of you do read Howard Zehr's Changing Lenses, you really will experience a paradigm shift in how you think about justice. And in reading that, you will read exactly what our program does. So if you ever do read it, just think in Fresno that this is how they operate. But really what we want to do is only the offender can apologize for what they did, and only the victim knows what happened to them. So we got to bring the person who did it together with the person who it happened to, because they can solve it better than anyone else. So it affords an opportunity for offenders who actually did it to say, hey, look, I did that, and I'm sorry, and I can fix it. And it gives a chance for that victim who was impacted by it to say, and when you did this to me, it was horrible for all these reasons, and I want my money back. Which is very true, they want their money back. So you can see on the slide a series of reasons why that is important. But mainly, the point is, only the offender can apologize for what they did, and only the victim can talk about their experience and receive the compensation. And what the victim really wants is the crime happened one day, and they want it to end. They want it to be over. They want to move on with their lives. And this program is only for the kids who did it, and it's an opportunity for them to solve that. So we started with the collaboration of Judge Gottlieb and the collaboration of the DA and the collaboration of the public defender and the collaboration of probation. And we met for a year. And at the end of the year, we decided we're going to do this work. And you were actually there for the first case that was ever assigned. So is there any comments you want to make about that?
Let me just kind of, I know that a lot of times people think, well, gosh, you know what, in our county, it's really hard to bring like a probation officer, a DA, and a public defender into the same room. But you know, when the invitation comes from a judge, they're usually showing up. And we had a lot of times where, you know, somebody would say, well, if this is going to be part of it, then we're out. And so there was a lot of mediation that went on in that room. So again, I harken back, you know, when Rob was talking about, you know, who we had at this panel. I mean, when we started this, nobody would have thought that we would have had a restorative justice conference where we had, you know, the author of 3 Strikes, our sheriff, our public defender, our DA, our chief of police, and you don't win elections in Fresno County by saying, oh, you know, let's try this kind of circling up and singing Kumbaya and seeing what happens. You don't win elections like that in Fresno County. You got to be tough on crime. And so we've done some videos, and we've called restorative justice smart on crime. And that's what it's really all about. And we're going to get to that in just a little bit. But the collaboration was really key. And there were sometimes, I'll just, one more comment about kind of reflecting back on this year. The district attorney at one point, and we had different people, representatives from their office come to these meetings. At one point, the district attorney says, you know what, Judge, you don't need us here. We don't need to be here. You can do this on your own. You know, and the next day, I had to make a couple phone calls and meet with a couple of other district attorneys, and I said, you know what, that's not the point of this program. The point of the program is not what I can do and how I can use my power to implement certain things. This is about the community doing what's right, and you're part of that community. And so I think it's incumbent upon you as a district attorney and as an elected official to do what's right. So let's get you back to the table, let's get this done. So you do need sometimes to do those things, but it can be done. All right, let's move on. Okay, so again, this is kind of the key principles of it. And one of the things that we always stress to our law enforcement partners is that middle ring there, is direct accountability. You know, and those of you who are in either law enforcement or attorneys or who have watched court proceedings, and now that I'm doing domestic violence, I see it and it bothers me. The attorneys are saying what their client should be saying, and that's the way our system is. So if I ask a guy who comes in, you know, late, and I say, well, why are you late?
I was
The attorney
wondering
will say,
who
don't
sends
answer
out
that.
your press releases? Question mark.
And so that's kind of the beauty about doing this in juvenile court, is that it's direct accountability. I'm looking that kid square in the eye, and after his attorney has told him, you know, kind of what to expect, I'm saying, Do you want to participate in this program? It's not going to be easy. It's going to be hard, but if you want to participate, you need to tell me right now that you want to be held accountable and that you want to say sorry. You want to apologize for what you did. And the beauty of the program is getting that kid, either in my court or in the mediation, to say, I'm really, really sorry about what I did. I wasn't thinking at the time. I was, either drunk, I wasn't thinking, I was thinking about something else. But you know what? Now that I've thought about it and I've reflected on my actions, I can really see how it has impacted my community. So it's all about direct accountability, remorse, forgiveness, and then, of course, reconciliation. So these are the keys to it. So, moving on. You know what? Can I just go a little bit further, and then we'll open up to some questions, because I know that time is a-ticking, and we have a lot of slides to go.
Yeah.
But
If you go to a movie, you should
we
be
want to do
talking
kind of an
about
open forum, definitely. So let me get a couple more slides in, and then we'll definitely take questions. So these are the nuts and the bolts of how it works in the courtroom. So what happens is of course, law enforcement makes the arrest, juvenile probation makes the decision as to, moving the case forward, and then the district attorney takes the case on and files a formal petition in court. There are two ways in which the case resolves in my court. So the young man or young woman is sitting there in my court with their parents, with their attorney, and they say, we want to go through restorative justice. We want to go through CJC. I say, okay, here's a form that I want you to fill out. And the primary purpose of that form is for them to put down that they are accepting responsibility and that they want to go through this process, and that they understand that they will be meeting face-to-face with the victim, and that we expect that not only they will participate, but that their parents, family, or community members will participate. And then I tell them, okay, now that you've decided you want to do that, I'm going to send you through this process, and you're going to come up with an agreement. And that agreement will come back to me for my approval, and 9 times out of 10, that agreement is done, comes back to me, and they've completed it when I see them again in 9 weeks. And I'm gonna turn it over to Tim to kind of tell you what happens after it leaves my court. But for those of you involved in kind of the court system, there are 2 different types of probation. There's formal probation and informal probation for youth. And so we've really married our CJC program to those 2 processes, those 2 legal processes. And we've done it in such a way that we can get it all done in 9 weeks, which is incredible for those of you that kind of know how the court systems work. For us to get the case from start to finish done in 9 weeks is pretty amazing stuff. There are reports that are generated by CJC. Probation is involved in helping, and probation has been an amazing, amazing partner. And it didn't start off that way. Probation had a lot of difficulties with it, but I think after about the first 6 months, when they saw what was going on and how the parents and the kids took responsibility and stepped up, and more importantly, it probably cut their workload in 50%. More than anybody else, probation's workload got cut significantly as a result of this. So next I'm going to turn it over to Tim to tell kind of what goes on after they leave my court the first time.
So they walk out of his court and they walk across the hallway into the office that we have there at the courtroom. And we ask them 3 questions. And we ask them, first of all, on a scale from 1 to 10, 1 being not responsible for this and 10 being responsible for this, what number would you give yourself? If they give themselves a 0 and say, I didn't do it, I'm not responsible for this, we say, then you should go back to court and you should tell them that and you should get the case dismissed. And in the event that that has happened, I remember one case in particular. A young lady got charged of hitting her teacher. She came into the room. She told me, they told me I need to come tell you I did this, but I really didn't. I said, well, if you really didn't, you should really go back to court and tell them that you didn't. And so she went back to court, she pled not guilty, and they sent out an investigator to speak with the teacher, and the teacher said, no, I was not hit by her, and her case was dismissed. So when the juvenile does not commit the action, they don't commit the action, we send them back to court. However, in the other instances when they have done it, then they say, okay, I'm an 8 out of 10, I'm a 9 out of 10, I'm a 10 out of 10, I really did it. And I ask them, what do you think about the victim's situation right now? And they think, oh, the victim's probably really angry with me. You know, I broke their window, I stole their money, I took their iPod, I vandalized their house. They're probably angry with me. And I say, well, would you like to do something about that? And if they say, yes, I'd like to apologize, I'd like to repair that. When I tell this part of it, I think of a juvenile who was 17. He wrote in his apology letter that he read to the business owner that he'd broken into their business. He wrote, I'm 17 years old now. I'm going to be 18 soon, which means I'm going to be a man. And that means I should apologize like a man would. And I thought, that's exactly what I think is at the heart of this. You did it, okay, apologize, now help make things right. The last question I ask them is, do you plan on doing this again in the future? And if they say no, then we have, yes, they did it, yes, they're going to make things right, and no, they're not going to do this again in the future. That is music to a victim's ears. They want to know that. They want their stuff back. They want to know that they're safe in the future. So what we do then is we meet with the victim, and we just listen to them. Has anyone here been a victim of a crime? I have. Put your hands up if you have. Okay. When I called my grandma to say that I was a victim of a crime, in all her love for me, she started asking questions. Did you lock the door? Did you call the police? Okay, that made me feel like, okay, maybe it was my fault that I got my stuff stolen. My grandma loves me. I love her. But when we listen to a victim, we just listen. We don't tell them what they should have or could have done. We just listen to them. And then after we've listened to them, we let them know. This juvenile and their family, they're willing to apologize and make reparations. Would you like to meet them? It's completely optional. They don't have to if they don't want to. And when they choose to, we bring them together face to face. One of the things I noticed with people's speeches, every single person thanked their family when they came up to accept their award. They thanked their family. Everyone loves their family and is a product of their family, and that is why we include mother, father, grandfather, uncle, aunt, grandmother in every single meeting. And then we come together, we talk about what happened, talk about how to fix it. We make that agreement, and we send it back to court. And that's where the judge receives it.
Let's move on. Okay, so we've gone all through this already, and this is kind of the funnel of what happens ahead of time and goes to the CJC intake, and it is voluntarily based. Let's go to the next. And we talked, Tim already had talked about this. We talked about the 45 days. Let's move on. Okay, so actually before we go to some of the statistics and some of the byproducts of this program, let me stop here and ask if there are any questions. I know you had one earlier. Did we already answer it? Excellent. Okay, good. And we really try.
Raise the issue.
And it's kind of interesting because there was some pushback from some of the public defenders. Some of that pushback was that, you know, if they just plead guilty, they would probably not have to do as much work as they do going through this program. And there is, you know, some work involved in it on their part. And the real hard work is actually coming to terms and saying, hey, I did this, I did wrong, I'm going to do something about it. There's a question in the back. Sure. There is an other there that's 11%. And I can tell you that, quite honestly,
I'm fine with
the drug crimes that I handled over the last 4 or 5 years, and it might be because we're in Fresno County, Most of them, if their drug crimes, are filed as felonies, and that kind of takes it outside. But we did handle, I mean, misdemeanor marijuana cases we would put through this program. Interestingly enough, and I'm just saying anecdotally, in the 5 years that I was out there, we didn't have a lot of only drug crimes. So all of this is driven by marijuana use or alcohol use or other, methamphetamine use. But honestly, we don't see a lot of just possession crimes. So that answers it. So these are the types of crimes that we handled. A lot of vandalism, a lot of theft from stores, a lot of the batteries and the assaults, some burglaries, and we did start handling some felony cases too. One in particular that we did some special treatment of was a residential burglary, which, as most of you are aware, is a strike offense. It's a serious felony offense. But in this particular case, this young man had broken up with a girlfriend, got very drunk, and went over to what he thought was an abandoned house across the street from where he lived, and broke in to try and take alcohol. I think was successful in getting the alcohol as well.
On West Capitol, you're correct.
Got caught a very short time later, I think
correct.
stumbling around the street somewhere, admitted to responsibility, and it was extremely difficult because he lived across the street from this house, and the person who was moving into the house, who was in the process of moving in, had a very difficult time meeting up with the kid that violated her very basic homestead. However, after it all went through, the particular victim in that case was extremely thankful and said, without this program, I don't think that I could have ever returned to that home. Now, he's my neighbor. I see him. We say hi to each other. We're able to communicate. And one of the most difficult things about committing a crime in a neighborhood that you live in is that you're going to see that person that you committed that crime on for many years. And to be able to overcome that on both sides of the coin is just one of the amazing stories that we have about this program. All right, let's move on. Okay, the outcome of the CJC, $69,000 over a 3-year period of time. And let me just kind of put that in perspective.
Yeah.
We asked probation what amounts of money they would collect typically in a year, and not only through misdemeanors, but felonies and the entirety. It was about $11,000 every year consistently for about a 4 or 5 year period that we looked at those numbers. So for CJC to collect, $51,000, that's more than $15,000 a year. That is on top of whatever monies that probation collects. So again, it just goes back to kind of common sense, and all the studies bear out that if you make a promise to somebody one-on-one that I'm going to repay you for this damage or this loss, it gets paid. It gets paid. There's that responsibility. Whereas if you say, well, I have to pay back probation or the court, hey, there are a lot of unpaid tickets out there. Yes, ma'am. Sure, yes.
That's not the point.
Right.
You're correct, but that's not. Yeah, that's not the point, actually.
Right, right.
Of course not.
I sure can.
No, we
I'm
don't
not going
know.
to talk about it right now, but I promise you I'm going to get to it. Because there's some exciting news on that. Okay. Next slide. Okay, this is recidivism, which is the huge bullet that in our, or arrow in our quiver in terms of showing this program to victims groups and police groups and everybody else, quite honestly, is that if this program, number one, if it didn't work, I wouldn't keep doing it for 5 years. I mean, that's kind of a waste of my time. But when I saw these numbers, and we did a study, this is the 3-year study. And I want to say that we just received some additional funding through the California Endowment to have Berkeley, UC Berkeley, do a 4 or 5 year study. 5-year study. Look at all of our data, do a 5-year study, independent study, come in and replicate the numbers that we have done right here. And it would be probably one of the first, and I understand it's going to be a published study, it will be one of the first juvenile restorative justice programs in the state that will have a published study that will analyze our recidivism rate. So these are the numbers that we've been able to replicate now for a 3-year period of time that just shows, you know, we had 725 minors go through this program. It's probably 1,000 now with a 15% recidivism rate. So that means out of those 1,000, there are 150 that are recidivating over a 3-year period of time, which I don't think there's any other program out there that can replicate that. Without the program, recidivism rate is about 34%. So let's go to the next one. This was a study that we did about 2 years ago that took, as you remember, we started the program July of 2009. So we looked at the same or similarly situated minors from 2008 to 2009 before CJC was even in the courts. And the recidivism rate after 2 to 3 years was up between 25 and 30%. Currently, oh, we better go quick. All right. With CJC, you can see that the recidivism rate is down at 5% over on the far right. And we not only tracked new offenses, but we tracked sustained violations of probation as well. All right, let's go to the next. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Tim here to go through this one.
I'm going to tell a quick story that helps you understand this graph. I did a mediation one time. One young girl who had made a mistake, she stole an iPod and some money from one of her classmates. What happened was she came into gym class late, and she thought, oh, I'm late. Maybe I'll just take some stuff and never come to gym class. So she took the stuff, and she was walking out the door, and she got caught by security. She was not expelled for that offense, but she was sent to juvenile hall. So the victim who had been stolen from and the offender who had stolen now had school together every day for 4 more months. The victim had her stuff returned, but can you imagine that? Can you look at the person you're sitting next to and like, that person stole from you and you never quite talked about it? And can you imagine for that offender who really knew it was a mistake but didn't know how to bring that up? And for the victim who was offended by it but didn't have any way to resolve it. So you can imagine when I came and spoke with them, they were very excited to meet. After we brought them together face to face, within half an hour, they were inviting each other to their birthday parties and they were friends again, which is a wonderful story, but it gets better. What I did is I said, I'm going to meet back up with you in 1 month, and I'm just going to check in on how this is all going. So 1 month later, I met with the victim, and I asked her, so what do you think of all this? And the victim said something to me that I share with many different crowds, because I think it's a good story about what we can offer when people choose to work with us. The victim said, when I used to look at her, the word that would pop into my head was thief. And now when I look at her, the word that pops into my head is friend. And I thought that is such a great example of what can happen. So that story, those 2 girls coming together and talking about that, This graph kind of looks confusing, but the point is that the blue line is somebody who has not participated in victim-offender dialogue. And they're more likely to recidivate, so they go up higher than the other lines, and they go up quicker than the other lines. And you see on the bottom it says days between referrals and reoffense. So not only are they reoffending more often, but they're reoffending sooner. And if you contrast that to the red line, that 15% that unfortunately do make mistakes again in life, which I make mistakes in life as well, but that 15%, when they do recidivate, not only does it take longer for them to recidivate because they have met that victim, but that line never even comes close to where the blue one goes. Look at the difference between the bottom of the red line, or the top of the red line and the top of the blue one. So the idea here is that for that small percentage, even when they do make a new mistake, it takes longer for them to do it and less of them do it. So it's just to show in another way to think about why recidivism is less.
Why don't you go through this one too?
Okay. So I told that story about the girl who said, I used to think of her as a thief and now I think of her as a friend. Before the mediation, we asked the victim and offender, what do you think of the other party? We asked them separately. Then we ask them the same question after the mediation. What do you think of the other party? You can see that bringing an offender and a victim together to speak about what happened raises their perception of the other party by a significant point. So you can see that the victim feels safer, 2.1. They come out of that meeting and they feel even better about that offender. And even the offender feels better about the victim. One of the comments I want to make about that is we do pre-meeting meetings. So we meet personally with the offender and we meet personally with the victim before we even bring them together. I think that thinking about somebody who stole your stuff on a 7 out of 10 or a 6 out of 10 before you even meet them is because we've done work beforehand and prepped them for those meetings. And then for them to come together face to face and to feel better, safer, resolved, getting their money back, those are very positive results. And we also do evaluations to make sure that our work is as professional as possible. We ask on a scale from 1 to 5 how the overall atmosphere is, whether the resolution was satisfactory, whether the meeting itself was helpful in answering questions. You know what victims want to know? Why me, and are you going to do it again, right? And they're saying a 4.6 out of 5. That's approximately 200 surveys that they feel like those questions have been answered. Was the meeting held fair? Did it help resolve your feelings? And the last one is very important. Would you recommend this to a friend in a similar situation? 4.77 out of 5.
I think that's great. That's the highest number. Yeah. You know.
And if you notice, that's the highest number. 4.77 is the highest one. So this is your final thoughts, Judge.
All right. All right. So in doing these presentations over
Just about done YouTubing